first started my dissertation, my topic was, wait for it, Northeast Tennessee teachers' perception of the impact of standardized testing on teaching learning. Yes, as interesting as it sounds. Absolutely. So that was my plan. But as we all know, our plan isn't always his plan, right? And so that was going to be my dissertation. And so when you're working on something and it seems like such a job and such a chore, and you can't make it come to fruition, sometimes you have to stop and ask yourself, why? Why is it that this plan that I have is not working? And then you question to find out maybe that's not where you're supposed to be. Tammy Davis is in the room with us. And her father, I know as Dr. Daddy Davis, is what I call him, Dr. Daddy Davis. And so the year that Jeannie was retiring, that last year, I had the privilege of being able to meet Jeannie and work with Jeannie. And he kept on saying, this story should be on Oprah. Somebody needs to tell Jeannie's story. Because as Tammy's planning the big celebration and everything that's going on, he kept on saying, someone's got to tell this story. And I said, yeah, you're right. I wasn't thinking that it meant me. So that was in 2006, right? And so instead of Northeast Tennessee teachers' perceptions of impact to standardized testing on teachers, say that 5 times fast. But instead of that, in 2008, I had the honor and privilege of becoming the first Black elementary school principal in Kingsport City Schools since desegregation. That same year was also the year, that same year was also the 40th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination. That same year was the year that our country voted for and elected the first Black president. I don't believe in coincidence. So looking at Jeannie's 40 years of service, the 40th anniversary of MLK, our nation electing Barack Obama, and me getting to become the principal of Jackson Elementary School, I said maybe it is a story that I need to tell. So I often believe that ordinary people sometimes get called to do extraordinary things. And I think telling Jeannie's story and honoring her legacy is an extraordinary calling that I don't take lightly. So, like I said, no such thing as a coincidence. I might have to do this because this thing is sweating. So back in, like I said, my dissertation was in 2009, is when I finished my dissertation. And so you're probably thinking, so why now? My mother passed in 21, which was a very difficult situation, difficult time for me, still is. When I moved to Clarksville back in 2014, I lost touch with Jeannie, did not keep in touch with Jeannie, and that's something that I regret. When I heard about her passing in 24, and I thought about her legacy and the impact that she had had, Jeannie and my mother had a whole lot in common, a whole lot in common. And so thinking that that legacy was going to end, and thinking that the people who have never had the opportunity to have met her now won't have that opportunity. And I thought it needs to go beyond where it's gone, that we need to share Jeannie with others. Because even though she was an ordinary person, she was an extraordinary person. And that is what I wanted everybody to see, what I wanted everybody to learn. And so I intentionally published the book during the week of Martin Luther King's birthday. Of course, like I said, it was originally my dissertation, so yes, it had been available, through academia, but I think that it belongs in a bigger venue. I think it belongs in a bigger light so that other people get to hear about and learn about the extraordinary person that Jeannie was. And my little thing does not want to work for me.
You changed mine.
I'm just not patient enough. So I wanted to read to you a couple excerpts from the book. Kind of like what Jan was saying, Jeannie's own words. Some of the words. So like I said, I got the opportunity to work with Jeannie for a year there at Lincoln. When I was working on my dissertation, though, I went to Jeannie's house. And we had multiple conversations, and we recorded the interviews, and so I got to ask her specific questions and get her input on things. And so it wasn't just my recollections from working with her. If it was that, it would probably be based on how she makes the chocolate sundae, the one that outdoes Shoney's, the ice cream. Yeah. So Jeannie would come to work, you guys, and she would bring the crock pot, set it up in the first time she told me about that, I'm like, what do you mean, you're making cake in the crock pot? So we're at work, and she would set up that crock pot and make the chocolate cake in the crock pot, and then have vanilla ice cream. So, yeah. So when we disappeared from the front office, that's where we were. When we disappeared, that's where we were. So, but it's not just those stories. I actually had an opportunity, like I said, to ask her questions and get her input and to be able to keep her words alive as well, not just my words. So one of the sections I wanted to read from you, or read for you. I had asked Jeannie if her teaching assistant position at Douglas was her first job. She answered with predictable Jeannie style. Oh, heavens no. I was working when I was a teenager. Well, we worked in people's homes. There used to be a lady that did hair. She was a black lady. I would iron for her. In exchange, she would do my hair. I've done so many things. You know, I did babysitting. You may get paid, you may not. But I've done housework. I've worked in a nursery school. That's what I was doing when the principal, Mr. Dobbins at Douglas, called me. When the teaching assistant thing came and asked me why I hadn't applied. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? I'd never heard of that. And he said, well, they are going to be doing interviewing this afternoon. So you come down and interview. Okay, so I went. I'm trying to think which assistant superintendent it was that did the interview. I don't remember, but anyway, so I got the job. Of course, that was just from March until the end of the school year. I don't know if you remember, they used to have elementary school supervisors that would go around to each elementary school ever so often and sit in the classrooms, really just checking the teachers out. A name I will never forget, Miss Bowman. That summer, they used to have summer school in Kingsport for the elementary. So she asked me if I'd want to work summer school. I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I worked summer school at Washington School. No, it was at Lincoln School that year. Usually it was always at Washington, but they were doing something at Washington, so it was at Lincoln. So I guess I met the secretary from Lincoln, and they called. So the teaching assistant didn't used to start until about November. But I never had heard anything, so I went to my other job that I had back at the nursery. And Willie called me and said, they called me from Lincoln School. You need to call them back. And then I called them, and they wanted to know why I didn't come. What do you mean why I didn't? So evidently, the central office thought the principal was going to call, and the principal thought that central office was going to call. Yeah, so, you know, I'm over here at my other job, and they call and say, well, come on up here. And I said, I hate to leave, but I've got to go. I've got this job. And I didn't even know the principal, had never met the principal at Lincoln. So I knew the secretary, and the principal hired me on what the secretary had said. Miss Sandusky was the principal, and I had never met her. So that was where it started with her being a teaching assistant for first at Douglas and then summer school for Kingsport City Schools, for the integrated schools or the non-disaggregated schools. And as someone mentioned earlier, Jen mentioned the idea that she never wanted to be in the spotlight. Jeannie wasn't about the accolades. She was never about the, look at me, look at what I'm doing. She saw something that needed to be done, and she just did it. It had nothing to do with, I'm doing this because it's about me, or because I want people to look at me, or because I want to be known for this. It was truly just about, it needs to be done. So she started out as a teaching assistant. From that, she became what we call the voice and face of Lincoln Elementary School. And much like Jan said, that front office was her ministry. Every time she greeted a child, she greeted them by name. She knew their birthdays. Like Jan said, she knew everything about them. And she looked at it always as an opportunity of service. When we think about not wanting the accolades, I'm going to read to you a section on page 139. Although Jeannie will never admit that she deserved to be honored in a celebration recognizing her for 40 years of service to the children of Kingsport, thankfully Tammy Davis, principal at Lincoln, and many others felt the honor was well deserved. Jeannie mentioned that she and her colleagues always got along. Several former colleagues wrote letters and sent photos to be shared at Jeannie's retirement celebration. Jeannie worked in the school system for 40 years. She worked as a teaching assistant from 1966 until 1990. when she became the office assistant. Jeannie was often referred to as the face and voice of Lincoln School. She retired at the close of school in May of 2006. Over those 40 years, Jeannie made a countless number of copies, answered an incalculable number of phone calls, stood watch during more cafeteria lunches than anyone would care to recall, assisted in a vast number of classrooms, helped a myriad of students with their work, and touched more lives of both children and adults than can be measured. Even when Jeannie was working in the office, she never let an opportunity to help students be wasted. She was always ready with a kind word of encouragement or a few moments spent helping students with reading or other assignments in the hallway. Jeannie often talks about how she had been blessed throughout her life. I do not believe that she has any idea what a blessing she is to others. She is a true example of servant leadership, always giving of herself, trying to find ways to help others, giving encouragement and support, and never seeking recognition. On March 14, 2006, several individuals whose lives had been enriched by Jeannie had the perfect opportunity to express their gratitude. The day started with the arrival of a chauffeur. She had once mentioned that she'd never ridden in a limousine and that she wanted to ride the limousine. So Tammy made sure that that happened. So the day started with the arrival of a chauffeur, then breakfast at the Riverview Convention Center, while a banner was hung at the front entrance of the school. Jeannie returned from breakfast to a red carpet welcome from students, colleagues, friends, and family gathered along the sidewalk. The festivities then moved indoors to the school auditorium with a performance by Tony Foreman and the Men of Lincoln, all of the male teachers at Lincoln Elementary, and Mayor Dennis Phillips' proclamation of Jeannie Hodges Day. Reflective remarks were made by Richard Kitzmiller, the superintendent at the time, Ed Abbott, who was the former principal, Tammy Davis, who was the current principal, Willie Hodges, husband, Jan Russell, colleague and friend, and Pat Cox, colleague and friend. Pat Cox also presented Jeannie with a scrapbook compiled of photos and notes written by friends and family members. At the close of the ceremony, Ida Machen and Jan Russell sang "Wind Beneath My Wings," while a pictorial history was shown on the projection screen. Following the ceremony, a reception was held in the school's main alcove. Jeannie was visibly still in shock. As friends and family members continued to celebrate and express their appreciation, Jeannie Hodges Day was featured in the Kingsport Times News. Statement reported that she recalled a few of the changes she had witnessed in her 4 decades, but one thing didn't change in 40 years: Jeannie Hodges and her megawatt smile. And I've got for you just a couple of pictures from that celebration. So, as I mentioned, it was truly like a red carpet event. When they whisked her away, the rest of us took care of making sure that everybody was in place and everything was in motion. She came back, and every student lined the sidewalk as she came back, and she was doing the little wave. And the whole time, just cheesing from ear to ear. Cheesing from ear to ear. And those are the Men of Lincoln. And top hats and tails, of course, and canes.
Carolyn, I might say that was the only day that Jeannie got frustrated at work because I wouldn't let her work. And she kept trying to work. I said, "This is your day. You cannot work today. You're just enjoying."
And it might have been because we weren't doing things right. It might have been because we weren't doing things right. And she knew ways that it should have been done better than the way that we were doing it. Let me see if I can get this to advance. It's got a lag. It's taking its time. Because the next one is a picture of the mayor giving his proclamation. There we go. A clip from the newspaper article. And then, of course, Jan and Ida singing. And then just a picture of the reception in the hallway area. And again, like I said, she would have never said that she deserved any kind of recognition. And that's why it was all the more special. So when we think about her impact, and we think about what she left for us, the legacy that she left for us, when I asked her about some of the work that she did, she says, "I really work with South Central who's the parent group for Weed and Seed. A lot of people ask me, and I'll say something about Weed and Seed, and they'll say, what's Weed and Seed? And I'll say, okay, just think of a garden. You go in, you weed out the weeds, the bad element, or whatever. And then you seed it, within this case of Weed and Seed, you seed it with something good. You know, if it's drugs or violence, that's the weeding. Then you try to replace it with hopefully jobs, job training, and education. Whatever you need to make the community a better place, a safer place. Improve the quality of life. Like I say, I do have a book that is official, but that's basically what Weed and Seed is. And Lord, anybody can testify that if you lived in Riverview, I couldn't believe you wouldn't have been able to come in here like you did today a couple of years ago, because the drug dealers would be all up and down Lincoln Street. She says, what happens is that I get involved in everything. I was on the Kingsport nursery board one time. I guess that was probably about the first board I was on. Then when they were organized South Central, somebody called me and asked me to be the treasurer. And naturally, I don't know how to say no. Yeah, I mean, that's always how you end up on something. Somebody calls you and asks you, would you do it? And like I said, I've never learned to say no. I have a problem with that. I want to see if there's medication for it. I used to volunteer at FunFest, and now I'm on the FunFest Council. I used to work in the FunFest store as a volunteer, and we'd have to go in and fold all those t-shirts. We do that like 6 weeks before FunFest started. Then we'd work the store all during FunFest. It was fun. I've been on so much, I can't even remember it all, because I don't know how to say no. But South Central, I know that's been since, because you can only serve 2 3-year terms, so I was on it from 2000. Now I'm employed by them. So what happened to Weed and Seed, when it is first started, they just took the officers from South Central, and we did Weed and Seed when it was getting off the ground. I'm still on the steering committee for Weed and Seed as well. I'm not a board member for South Central, but I'm employed by them. And you know, when you get on something, you're just on it for years and years and years. Then you finally just have to say, I think I've done this long enough. But then as you're saying that, somebody else is asking, well, you're not doing that now. How about you? I enjoy it. Most of it, I really do. Like I say, most people, somebody's got to do it. And there's not a lot of people. It's time. It just takes your time. It's a worthy cause, much needed, especially when you try and do something for the kids. When they're out of school, you can't do something every day they're out. But you know, kids, idle time is not good. So those were some of the words that she shared with me when I met with Jeannie. And so as we mentioned earlier, she's the type of person that some people come into your life, you know, quietly. And some people, though, come into your life like a sonic boom. Her presence, her spirit, was a sonic boom. So even though she came in quietly, even though she wasn't about the spotlight, she wasn't about titles and accolades and all those other things, there was just something about her spirit. You could not have been in the presence of Jeannie and not be impacted. If you were, I don't know how you did it. Because she just had that type of personality. That she was going to pour into you, she was going to rain on you, she was going to share everything that she had with you. Whether she's known you for years, or whether she had just met you. It didn't matter. It did not matter. And so just knowing Jeannie makes your life better. Hopefully that will change in a second. As I mentioned earlier, Jeannie and my mother were so much alike. In their spirit, in their service, in their strength. And I have now challenged myself to try to live to the standard that my mother and Jeannie have set for me. Because I don't know that you can go wrong in life if that's the way that you're living. Because it was all about doing for other people. So her legacy, when we say that we're honoring her legacy has shaped my lens. The way that I look at others, the way that I look at opportunities, the way that I look at a calling of making an impact for other people, of helping others. So like I said, Mom and Jeannie, very, very, very similar people. And so her story as I was learning about her story, not only was I learning hers, I was being confronted by mine and thinking, am I living to that standard? Am I working to help other people? Am I striving to make sure that I'm making a difference and that I'm leaving this world better than the way that I found it? And so when we think about Jeannie and we think about what it means to be a quiet, humble leader, she was the epitome of that. There was a time that I asked her about how she didn't get dejected or disappointed or give up on all of the things she was trying to do. Because as you know, when you're trying to help people, oftentimes you don't see that impact. And so I asked her many times, what is it? How do you just keep going? And that's why I titled this conversation with you the way that I did. So I asked Jeannie what she thought had kept her involved in the community for all these years, trying to help others. I asked her what keeps her from becoming dejected and giving up. I'm just not a give-up person. And I guess that job I have now, the reason I took it, I hated to see not anybody do it. People, they laugh at me because this employment outreach. I stress, it's not an employment office, it's an outreach program. Which means if somebody calls me and says, I need some workers, I'll go knock on the door, somebody's door. If I can't get them on the phone, I'll go the extra step to let them know, hey, they're hiring at such and such a place. Because I just want to help them that much. And then I'll still act like I'm their mother, their grandmother, because I do the training program. And I know some of them don't want to stick to nothing. Now listen, are you gonna stick with this? Yes ma'am, I am. Yeah, and then she laughed. They want the money on payday, but they really don't want to do the work. And so she called herself not a give-up person. And like I said, although she wasn't driven by titles, she wasn't driven by accolades, it wasn't about extra initials behind her name. It was all about what can I do to help somebody else. That's who Jeannie was. Her life was all about if I can help somebody else. She told me that her favorite song was If I Can Help Somebody, which was made famous by Mahalia Jackson. The song that goes, if I can help somebody as I travel along, if I can help somebody with a word or a song, if I can help somebody from doing wrong, no, my living shall not be in vain. And that wasn't just a song for Jeannie. That was her mission. That was her way that she lived her life. Not just a song that we sing because it came on the radio and it sounds great, but it's because it was ingrained in her. That was who she was all about my living's not going to be in vain. I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to help others to be better. And so now I'm hoping that that also is shaping my mission. That also is shaping my lens of the way that I look at things and the way that I approach life and the way that I look at outreach and helping others. So it was quiet strength. Although Jan says yes, she could get with you if she needed to. If she needed to. But even as I was talking to Jeannie, those times that I went and interviewed her, I was talking to her about segregation. I was talking to her about that process of desegregation, about integration. And typically you expect to hear all kinds of horror stories. Not a single negative word came out of her mouth. There were times when we were talking and she'd start to say something and she'd pause. She'd pause, she'd reframe, and then she'd move forward. Always in a positive light. I don't think I can remember a time that Jean was negative. And like I said, so many people, when you're looking through that lens, when I say from black and white, we're talking about that move from, us, them, everybody separate, and looking at how we come together. But her story, the way that she told it, was always from a lens of positivity. Not at all saying that, she glossed over everything and said that everything was beautiful, everything was great, but what she chose to focus on was the positive. Because our focus is what shapes where we go next. If we focus on the negative, because it's there, but if that's what we live, be our focus, then that's what we're shaping our lens, shaping our thoughts, shaping our words, and shaping our actions. She chose to rise. She chose to focus on the positive, even if you had to look hard for it, but she chose. And because of that, her entire legacy is about that resilience. It's about the idea that we are going to encounter hard times. It's not a matter of if, we're going to. And we're going to encounter opposition. We're going to encounter struggle. But the thing is, what do we choose to do about it? And again, it's not about having, you don't have to have a platform, you don't have to have the titles, and all the other things in order to make a difference. She made a difference in every student's life that came through the door at Lincoln Elementary School. I believe she made a difference in every adult's life that came through the door at Lincoln Elementary School. Just because of who she was and how she lived her life. Like I said, my meeting with her was back in 2005. And it feels like we were sharing Sunday cake yesterday. She just leaves that resonance with you. So when we think about that whole not giving up, I know there's been times in my life, and like I said, telling her story, reading her story, writing her story made me reflect upon my life. And it confronted me with areas, because I know that there's been times that I have tried or contemplated giving up. And so you ask yourself, if I have a calling, if I have a gift, if I have something that I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm not using it, it's disobedience, right? And not only that, but maybe it's you that's going to make a difference for somebody else. And if you choose not to step into where you're supposed to be going, then maybe somebody else is missing out because of you. So I challenge you today to think about, where in your life are you being called not to give up? Where are you being called in your life to rise? Is it in a dream that's gone quiet? A prayer that you're still waiting for to be answered? A journey that you've put on pause? Or maybe even just letting your voice speak out to help somebody else? Understanding that everything that we do ripples. We may not see the impact. I'm sure that Jeannie has no impact, no idea of the impact that she had. Like I said, she didn't even believe that she deserved the celebration. And the thing is that the small things that we do today make such a great impact. It doesn't have to be something large, it doesn't have to be something extravagant. It's just simply a matter of stepping up and showing up. For a legacy to be lasting, it doesn't have to be large, it just has to be faithful. You just have to show up again and again and again. When she was growing up and people told her that she didn't matter, they told her that she didn't belong, they told her that her voice didn't matter, they told her that her journey didn't matter. She could have chose to acquiesce and agree. She could have chose to strike out, but instead, in her quiet, resilient way, she just kept showing up again and again and again. And that's why you couldn't ignore somebody like Jeannie. She wasn't going away. She wasn't going away. And whether you wanted to be impacted or not, you didn't have a choice. She was going to impact you. If you met her, if you talked to her, she was going to impact you. It wasn't a, would you like me to? That wasn't the question. So her legacy lives on in all of us. The book was titled Black and White, From Black and White to a Vibrant Tapestry. And the reason behind that is because it's not about what separates us. It's about what brings us together. And when we think about, each of us has a thread that we carry through life, and all of those threads come together. And when we weave those threads together, we have a beautiful, vibrant tapestry. So what I challenge you with today is to make sure that you're carrying that thread with honor. I am privileged to be able to try to carry forward her thread, to make sure that other people hear about Jeannie's journey, to know about the type of person that she was, and to understand that every person, as ordinary as we might be, there's something extraordinary in all of us. We just have to choose to use it, we just have to choose to show it, and we have to choose to share it. And so, Jeannie's life impacts us all. And like I said, it's going to impact people that she hasn't even met. Your lives may impact somebody that you have yet to even meet. The journey that you're leading right now, the way that you're living your journey, may be the inspiration that somebody else needs one day for them to become a not a give up person. So, again, your journey matters. Thank you all for inviting me to join you today and sharing a little bit about it has been a privilege and an honor. This being her home church, and I know it didn't become her home church until after she married Willie. But the thing about it is that it being her home church, church isn't just a place she went. She carried it with her. She carried it with her. But knowing that this was her home church, it completely humbles me that she invited me to be able to come here in this space in her home church and to be able to talk about her and to be able to keep her legacy alive and to be able to honor her spirit. So thank you. Thank you.